Picture this. It's a pitch black October night, and you're huddled in the darkness, surrounded by whispered tales of ancient sorcery and restless spirits. But what if I told you that the age-old tradition, rooted in Celtic mysticism, evolved into the modern-day phenomenon we know as trick-or-treating? Today we're embarking on a journey through time to unravel the captivating history and evolution of Halloween. From the enigmatic rituals of our ancestors to the sugary treasures children covet today, this is a story that spans centuries and continents. Welcome to the fascinating story of Halloween's hidden past. Have you seen the ghost of John? Long white bones with the skin all gone. Ooh, it's Jason McCoy. I'm back for a spooky edition, the history of Halloween, alongside my co-host and confidant,
Nelson Boyer.
Oh yeah, a little spooky something for you.
Oh yeah, buddy. So today we're talking about Halloween, huh?
Yeah,
Halloween.
Let's put it on the couch.
Let's do it.
I don't think you have any notion of the true strengths and depths of the opposition to our work. There's the whole medical establishment, of course, baying to send Freud to the auto da fe. But that's as nothing compared to what happens when our ideas begin to trickle through in whatever garbled form they're relayed to the public. The denials, the frenzy, the incoherent rage.
Halloween.
The macabre,
It's coming
ghosts,
up, man. What are your kids going to be
ghoulies,
for Halloween?
goblins.
What are your kids going to be?
And I think my daughter's going to be Messe, Lionel Messe. My son is going to be he's going to be a scary clown. But honestly,
Like an It?
he believes, he calls
Okay.
it Pennywise. But honestly, I think
Love Pennywise.
his costume is scarier than Pennywise.
All right.
And I think the fact that he's so little and he's standing there in that outfit with that mask, it makes it even creepier. Now me,
Yeah, you didn't tell me.
my wife and I will probably
You
do
bring
something.
back the Trump costume?
Honestly, I don't think so. And honestly, what I've always done is kind of a last 24, 48 hours, pull something together. Willy Wonka, by the way. I didn't tell you about this.
Oh, yeah.
Let me tell you and my audience. About 10 years ago, when my wife and I were just married, we went to a party here in Wilmington. It was at an old warehouse down near the shipping docks. What is it called? The port.
Yeah.
Never been down that way. Certainly never been to this warehouse. When I was looking for it, I swear to you, I couldn't find it. Couldn't believe that was the home of a party that I'd paid $20 to enter. But I came home after work that day in anticipation of taking my wife to this party and a couple of my friends who were going to go with us, and didn't have an outfit. But I said, you know what I think I want to do? I think I want to make a couple of little golden tickets, and I want to make a Willy Wonka outfit, and I want the cane that he walked with, and I want it all. My wife's like, how are you going to do that? Went out in the yard, cut a limb off of a tree, and started whittling it with the knife my granddad had given me when he passed away.
Did you just say whittle?
Whittle.
Wow. Your South
Check this
Carolina
out.
showing.
Yeah, dude. And check this out. I had a velvet purple jacket already. I had an old wig, or my wife had one. We went to one of these Halloween stores that pops up, the week before Halloween. And I found a top hat that worked perfectly for Willy Wonka. And then we saw it. A giant blow-up blue girl. Yep, you guessed it. Violet Beauregard.
The blueberry.
My wife was Violet. We came home and painted her face blue, and it had a little battery-powered pack in it with a fan. It kept her cool that night as we were dancing and partying, and she blew up like a 500-pound, maybe 1,000-pound earth ball.
That's awesome.
And she was so big and couldn't fit anywhere as we walked around that night. But she and I danced while hundreds of people stood around us that night. We didn't realize it was the Halloween costume contest that was going on. And the dance was something extra that we did. She got a little embarrassed or went off to get another beer, and I kept dancing. I've got photos and video of this. And I mean, I was flipping the cane. I was spinning it on the floor and dancing around it, and it was like the centrifugal force was keeping it spinning. It was on a different planet. All my friends were there raving for me. There were probably 300-400 people at this party. Everybody dressed in a better costume than the rest. Mine was a couple hours. I made this thing. I pulled it off. I had the cards that I handmade that I was handing out. We got second place in the costume contest.
Oh,
Walter White from
God,
Breaking
that's
Bad.
terrible.
There was a
That is
guy in
terrible.
there in tighty-whitey underwear.
I could have done that.
He had tighty-whitey underwear on, okay?
Yeah.
And he had a bag of this blue-looking ice, which was meth, and he had a gas mask.
That's terrible.
That's all he
That
had.
was terrible.
Dude, there was a guy there who was
Lazy.
like the Terminator or
Thank God.
the Predator. There was so many cool. There was a guy there that had a jacket on. He was kind of like a terrorist, a bomber,
Yeah.
but it was a Jägermeister machine. He had built
So
himself,
lazy.
and you could
It's
give
so
yourself
dumb.
shots with his bomb backpack.
Oh, so.
And he
like a
didn't. He
Jaeger
got third
bomb.
place.
That's terrible.
Jaeger bomb. No, it was amazing. He
That's terrible.
engineered this thing with his own two hands. He built this thing from scratch.
People
and
have
he got
way too
third-
much time on
Third
that.
place.
Oh, then on that note, I do really enjoy the binging or the excess diagnosis. Thank God you found the Violet Beauregard, because when you were describing the costume,
Yeah, if
with
I'd
the
taken my
jacket,
wife, she's got short hair, I would have looked like a real pedophile.
I was gonna say you'd look like a pimp. Like, I mean, with the
No,
jacket.
my
and the
wife is
cane and the hat.
5'4". I'm 6'4", right? I was 240 pounds then. She was about 130. She has a little boy, a blonde haircut. She looked about 12 years old, even though she was 35 at the time. And I would have been Willy Wonka, the candy man. Yeah, that would have gone over well.
Yeah,
I'm glad we found the blue costume too.
yeah, that's a cool costume. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
man.
I've got some
Violet
photos I'll have to show
Beauregard.
you. In fact, maybe that'll be the cover of one of our little promo pieces that I put out.
Put it out there.
I'll put that one out
put it
there.
out
You guys
there,
look for
buddy.
that one.
So what the hell is all this about, man? Like, do you? I know you're going to get into the psychology of Halloween, but I love the history
I
of
think
this day.
Yeah,
man.
I'm with
This
you.
place is
I didn't know much about the
fascinating.
history, right? I knew that it had something to do with some pagan rituals a long time ago, and that probably the Church of England and or the Roman Catholics had something to do with it. You know, maybe putting their own spin on it, trying to control the people who believed in these things. But honestly, what I knew about Halloween was basically what I grew up with, right? You go out and trick or treat. You beg for candy. Some people give you candy, some people don't. And the ones who don't give you candy, you basically smash their pumpkins and run. That was pretty much my upbringing.
You were a pumpkin
I
smasher?
was one of the pumpkin smashers.
Oh God, I don't.
Hey,
even
but
like
look,
the
that's
band.
easy. That's easy.
I don't even like the band.
Easy to clean up, right? I wasn't one of the toilet paper rollers. I wasn't the house, TPing the house with toilet
Did you
paper.
ever get your house TP'd or egged?
No, not TP'd or egg. My house was bombarded with fireworks every time there was an opportunity, because my neighborhood friends were always wanting to war with one another with fireworks.
Well,
So
I'll tell you this, man. I've always hated the trick part of Halloween.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I have two.
You like the treat part better?
I like the treat part, man. I've had 2 black cats. You have to keep them inside. Like, we actually get messages from our vet that say, "Look, make sure your black cat is inside."
Because you're worried that
during
somebody
Halloween.
might superstitiously
Do something
misidentify it as something
stupid to
dangerous.
a black cat. I mean, people
Yeah.
do that, man. But look, the entire history of the day is steeped in this idea of communing between the physical world and the spirit world.
Yeah.
And that's not
here and now
that's not
versus the-
Catholic. That's not pagan. That's not Celtic. That's just something that is human, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
it seems
this,
that way.
this fascination with connecting with the deceased. the
Yeah, it's hard to
macabre
believe that
dead
this is all
so
there is,
awesome.
right?
It-
It's
it-
hard to believe. No one wants to believe that this is it. I mean,
we'll save that for
throughout
the next
most of human
episode.
history, we've only been, our life expectancy was probably only, 35, 40?
years.
So,
man.
I mean, come on. Jesus didn't make it but to 33. Again,
right.
don't want to give too much away for our next or one of the upcoming episodes.
No,
on-
but there's something I think innately appealing, obviously, historically, about the idea that there is a way to touch the people who have gone before, to connect with the spirit world. And there's something, I think, even though it's creepy, right? Something almost comforting about the idea that the afterworld, the spirit world, can reconnect with us.
You know,
it lets us reconnect with them.
Perhaps, yeah.
And it also is comforting just to think that people care, that the people who aren't here still care.
Yeah, psychologically,
it's a little narcissistic.
I think of it as an opportunity for renewal, an opportunity maybe to control the uncontrollable or to make more sense out of the senseless. And, you know, Halloween, especially the trick-or-treating, the partying, the dressing up, nowadays in the sexy costumes, it kind of represents the opportunity for you at least once a year to be someone that you can't be, you know, all the other 364 days a year. Nobody can judge you on Halloween if you go out scantily clad, right? Because it's just for fun.
Yeah.
Let's get into some of what historians tell us about the origins of Halloween. I mean, obviously, as we're talking about this, we could probably go back to like the beginning of primates and make the case that, you know, all semi to sentient beings were probably thinking about how to best control the world and whether or not the world existed when we closed our eyes or when our bodies were dead. But in terms of the record, what historians have to go on, and this is not a written record, I understand, because the people that we're going to talk about didn't actually believe in writing things down. They passed their traditions on orally. But talk about the ancient Celts, right? Those people that lived in Northern Ireland, Scotland, maybe some parts of France, 2,000 years ago. Set the stage for us.
Yeah, well, they had Samhain, right, which was a day
or Samhain.
Samhain. Look, don't ask me to pronounce Celtic. You brought me on for history, not pronunciation.
Not a lexicon.
Give me a break,
okay.
huh? I mean Welsh, Celtic. But look, here's the bottom line: that those people really believed that during that time period, fairies, beings could come back to Earth, and that they would often play tricks or games. Some were more devious. Some could pose a threat. And so in order to combat that threat, right, you would dress up, and it was an attempt to fool the deity, to fool the spirit world.
To disguise yourself.
To disguise yourself as something that was not threatening, that was not human, and that was connected as well to the spirit world.
Now, were all of these fairies necessarily bad, or would some of them maybe?
No, not all of them. Some of them were kind, some of them were benevolent, but a lot of times young people, as young people will do, as you obviously enjoyed doing, would engage in the same type of game that the deities were believed to be able to engage in.
So dress up themselves and go out and prank and
absolutely, man, absolutely. I love a good prank when it's not somebody doing it to me. When somebody's doing it to me, I absolutely hate that part.
Yeah. Well, I read somewhere that people dressed up like animals and dressed up like other monsters in an effort to kind of ward off these otherworldly, potentially like kidnappers and vandals, terrorists.
You have to understand something, okay? When we're talking about these people, we're talking about people, whether they're pagan or Christian or Islamic or Hindu, whatever. We're talking about people who are inherently more religious.
And more superstitious.
I don't like the word.
Religious?
I don't like the word superstitious because it makes it seem
it's
silly.
Judgy, isn't it?
It is a little judgy. What I'm saying to you is this. For people who couldn't explain the natural world, for people whom the spirit world was
this is
the
way they made sense out of it.
And so when we look at it, it's easy to look back and be like, ha, 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 how funny. They believe that you could control weather by, burying 4 beans in a certain field at a certain time and doing a dance and slaughtering a goat. Okay, yes. But, we can make anything seem silly with language. I'm sure you've done it. We can make we can make the belief in Catholicism, Christianity seem really stupid with language. Language is a clumsy vehicle for describing what was really going on. And superstition is really not the word I would use. For these people, magic was very much
I get it.
Part of their life.
I get it.
It was a part of their life.
I've been thoroughly reprimanded.
You're welcome.
Forgive me. I'll forgive you for mispronouncing Samhain, and you forgive me for these judgments that I've made on a people 2,000-3,000 years ago. The Celts, for whatever reason, believed that, as we know it, Halloween night, they called it Samhain,
Yeah.
was a time when the veil between this world and the other world was the thinnest. And it was
Yes.
a time when the harvest was over.
Yes.
And so it's time to maybe burn the stalks, celebrate, start hunkering down, maybe slaughter some animals because your winter's coming, right?
Yep.
To use the Game of Thrones reference, winter's coming.
I've never seen it.
And so we're going to commune with the spirits that night, fairies and whatever else that are roaming the earth at the time. We're going to commune with them. This kind of makes me think about the story of Jack.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it began 2,000 years ago, but I'm pretty sure the story of Jack, it's a fairy tale. It's been written about several times. I found that it's attributed to Irish folklore, but the story goes that Jack was just a average, Irish guy, and he was a little mischievous, and the devil actually tried to cut a deal with him, and Jack even outsmarted the devil. Until, of course, finally the devil got to him. The devil was like, I'm a little afraid to let him come live with me because, this guy is mischievous. So the devil just kind of threw these hot, hellish embers at him. Jack got them and put them inside his carved turnip
Oh, yeah.
and walked around with this lantern, roaming the earth forever. He couldn't go to heaven. He couldn't go to hell. He just kind of roamed around. And
Sure.
this became known as Jack O' Lantern or Jack of the Lantern. Some people even refer to him as Stingy Jack. But maybe, that's where the jack-o'-lantern, the carving of the pumpkin, gourds, originated. It seems that many of the rituals that we engage in mindlessly today, 2023, from the dressing up to the carving of the jack-o'-lantern to the trick-or-treating, in some way, shape, or form can be traced back to this Celtic sort of festival, this time of marking the harvest.
Well, I think that's certainly
2,000 years
true.
ago.
I think that's certainly true.
But we
Obviously-
can't blame them completely, right?
Well, we're not blaming them. We enjoy the day.
No,
don't
but
you?
we can't attribute everything that we do. Certainly
No.
not the sexy costumes and the
We'll get into the sexy.
and
I
all
wanna
the
talk
tricks.
To you
We
about
can't.
these sexy costumes. That's a psychological
We'll
thing.
get
We
there
gotta
for sure.
Talk about the sexy
But we
costumes.
can't attribute everything to the Celts 2,000-3,000 years ago. As much as I'd like to, because I know my ancestors were some of those first sufferers of the potato famine who came
Really?
here. There were about 500,000 of them, I think, that came across in the first wave during the
Wow.
potato famine. 2 million people were affected, but my ancestors were some of the first ones over.
Yeah, let me throw a little knowledge drop on
Yeah,
people.
please do.
Irish people are the only ethnic group in the world where the majority of their ethnic population does not live in their ancestral homeland.
Right.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and I'm one of them. I'm living proof.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I was Irish. I was probably more Scottish, but in that
they're
same
a-
general
they're a
area.
family, like-
I'm a Celt,
You're a Celt. You're
I'm a Celt.
Celtic. Okay, so you're not Irish.
which
You're-
is why I can pronounce Samhain.
Oh, well, wow. Do it again.
Samhain.
That's hot. Well done,
Samhain.
sir.
And
well done.
Samhain, by the way, I'm going to see how good Nelson is with spelling, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, Jesus.
How would you spell Samhain?
SWANHIAN.
Samhain.
Okay.
Samhain.
Well, I went crazy.
Doesn't sound at all like it's spelled.
Of course not.
But that's those
Celtic.
crazy Celts, would you?
Well, I mean, we're sitting across from one. So.
Yeah, sure are.
No,
No, but I was thinking about,
what I was going to say though
the church.
was
Go back to the
no,
church.
No, well, I mean, a lot when we talk about communing with the spirit world today, even though we might not be Christian, we do so from a Christian perspective. There's an element of fear. People weren't necessarily afraid. There wasn't necessarily something sinister associated with the day. In fact, there wasn't anything sinister associated with Samhain or these other early pagan traditions. It's not until we get into Christian traditions that it becomes sort of scary.
Yeah, isn't that something? The Christians, they're trying to convert people, trying to, I guess, maintain or maybe even accrue power across their empire, right?
Right.
Those pesky Catholics. What do they do to the Celts?
Well, so first of all, the
missionaries go over
they
and
take the day, and this happens, and we see this not just with Christian traditions, but with other examples of conversions where
colonization.
the dominant group is trying to cultivate support among.
Yeah,
or
we've
the-
got
I'm sorry,
nice names
the,
for it, right? It's not it's
You're gonna say indoctrination.
no. There's nicer names. I learned this in the diversity of psychology class in graduate school.
But what they would do is say, okay, well, look, we're a smaller group. We're trying to convert a larger group. Let's make sure that our traditions are new, holidays or new ways of doing things are very similar to the customs of the dominant group.
Sure.
And so when it came to these traditions, right, they put it around the same day. They went for November 1st. November 1st in the Catholic traditions becomes All Saints Day, right?
Yep.
And the day before All Saints Day or All Souls Day becomes the day before or the evening before, which is Holy Eve, right? So that becomes
Halloween. Yeah.
And during Halloween, what it was believed, and it was the same type of idea. You know, purgatory is a distinctly Catholic idea. And by the way, I'm grateful for it. Baptized Catholic.
Yeah, you don't have to do it all right on the earth.
Amen.
Even
brother.
after you die,
Preach.
you go to the
Preach.
waiting room.
Thank God.
And as long as you have
Literally.
people that care about you and continue making offerings on your behalf and praying for you, you may be able to make your way into heaven.
I mean, because I'm sure you and I both sitting here, we've got some venal sins, we've got some mortal sins.
I'd like to think there's a waiting room, right?
There's got to be.
I'm not
right?
Catholic, but you know what?
Eternal
damnation.
damnation.
I do want a waiting room, except I watch Beetlejuice. And
That
I don't know if
doesn't
you're
look like a good waiting
That
room.
does
That
not
is
look like a
true.
good waiting room.
But
It
that's
looks
also-
fun, but it doesn't look like good. Well, fun as in if you're Beetlejuice.
Or fun if you're not eating a shrimp cocktail at the wrong time.
Yeah.
I do love Beetlejuice. You know who else
By
likes
the way,
Beetlejuice?
it's coming back out again. I think there's going to be a Beetlejuice 2 or a
Well,
remake of
they
Beetlejuice.
actually, there's a Beetlejuice, there's a Beetlejuice musical. There's a play.
Love it.
Yeah. You know who else likes it?
Taylor Swift.
Lauren Boebert.
Oh, okay.
Lauren Boebert.
Lauren Boebert likes a lot of things I like.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert.
Lauren Boebert likes a lot of things I like.
Like public displays of affection, smoking a vape.
Yeah. So, Catholic Church, man, that was a daunting task, right? Converting these Celts.
So basically what people would do, right, on All Hallows Eve, before All Saints Day, is they would go to the home of wealthy people, people who they knew had relatives who were recently departed, and they say something like this, right? You know, Aunt Mildred, she was okay. I mean, you know, she was pretty good. I mean, I don't know if she was heaven good.
Now, these are the people that knocked on your door.
Yeah, they would knock on your door, you know, and
and tell you about your relatives.
I'm wondering if, well, she was a member of the village. I
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
Mildred.
I know her.
Mildred.
Sorry
You know,
for your loss.
You know, but maybe she needs a little push up the pyramid, you know. So maybe if a couple our fathers, a couple Hail Marys, some prayers, and you know, also
That's interesting missionary work, isn't
it?
it?
Look.
It kind of reminds me of some of the missionaries I've had dealings with throughout my life. People coming and knocking on your door during dinner, you know?
Well, they wouldn't just want to knock on your door and interrupt during dinner. They want a piece of the dinner. They'd want some beer.
They'd only come around, I guess, on October 31st.
On All Hallows Eve, right.
Coming on Hallows Eve.
Yeah, well, that is, again, there's this concept
And what
in
they call that?
Catholicism.
What they call that, Nelson?
All Hallows Eve.
No, the going around begging and trying to get something in return.
It was souls giving.
Souls giving,
souls giving. And so what they would do is they would say, well, let me get a biscuit, let me get a beer.
One of those little soul cakes.
Let me get a soul cake. Exactly.
Coin.
Soul cakes were very popular. And people would prepare them knowing that they were coming. And then you would have your prayers. Just the act of giving was to the poor, because it was the poor who would do this to the wealthy.
Around begging, yeah.
And just the act of giving to the poor, the impoverished, was also a form of penance that you could do on behalf of your dead relative in purgatory. And hopefully, again, the idea is to get them up into the big room, the fun room.
Yeah.
So,
and of course, Catholics didn't get rid of their celebrations or their days. They just kind of added to them, right? They still had All Saints Day.
All Saints Day.
On November 1st. And they still had All Souls Day, November 2nd.
Right.
And I'm assuming that people went out probably November 2nd too, souling. It makes sense to me to go out and
it wasn't,
maybe even beg then.
Now, the costume,
or at least the kids.
The costumes were not a part of this tradition, but there certainly wasn't like a 5 to 7 p.m. time frame like we have now.
Right.
People in that time period weren't governed by the hours of the day or
no
the
trunk
days
or treating.
of the week, right?
Yeah, you didn't have to wait to get off work.
And to your point earlier, this is a fallow time. This isn't a time, the harvest is done.
It's done.
And when you get into, you said slaughter animals, usually the slaughters would take place sometime a few weeks later, right? You'd only have fresh meat.
But it seems like you kill
two.
2 birds with 1 stone, right? Like you're poor, you're going to slaughter your animals, but you can also say, "Hey, I'm sacrificing them for the gods."
Yeah. Well, that was the case with and by the way, you know, to your point, that's why you had a pagan celebration shortly after the winter solstice
Mhm.
was because you were about to run out of fresh meat.
Yeah.
Right? Your fresh meat was about to go,
And you
and you'd
needed
still
some.
have meat, but it would be cured. It would
Yeah.
be smoked. It would be preserved some way. Yeah.
So initially, when the souling was happening, it was poor adults, beggars, and then it turned to children going out, right, and begging and offering performances, right,
Yes.
reciting poetry,
Yes.
and then
doing
of course,
a
as
show.
kids will do,
There's your treat.
as kids
There's
will
your
do,
treat.
if you don't get the right treat, you don't get the right cake or the right coins, you
Look,
play a little trick.
Look, 364 days out of the year, kids are punished
Yeah.
for X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
Across the country. But for one day,
One
if
day
you don't
can
do the
still
right thing,
loot,
Dad,
riot,
you know,
vandalize,
if
play
you
tricks.
don't exactly for one day, you get a pass.
Well, I don't think it was the Celts, the Celtic children that really gives the word trick its oomph. It would be a little later before we would see kids, turning to delinquency and vandalism and other kinds of things, and that would take place, I think, more in America than maybe anywhere.
Yeah,
But
America.
but I wanted to move to the medieval period.
Yeah, sure. Let's
If we
do
could
it.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there anything about the Middle Ages or medieval Europe that you can think of that might in some way inform the Halloween as we know it today?
I'm not really sure what you're getting at. What part in particular?
Well, I guess I was thinking about, the fact that the Pope during the Middle Ages was probably not completely convinced that he had everybody on board when it comes to Catholicism. Probably by that point was losing a lot of potential converts, competing against Church of England
Sure.
and Protestantism and obviously all of the pagans still. And so we turn to witch pricking. We turn to identifying
yeah,
heretics
sure.
and
Well,
putting them through their paces. And
Sure. That's such a good
and they
point.
happen to
I'm
be
so
women,
glad
right?
you
Witches
brought that
happen to
up.
be women.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, what symbol, right,
Mm-hmm.
is more connected to Halloween?
Besides the black cat and the jack-o'-lantern?
Well, the black cat is part of the witch thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
Black cat,
a lot of
broomstick,
absolutely
and the
these
witch.
symbols. Did you know there's I don't know how true it is or what impact it had, but I think we talked about this when we talked about pets. There was a period shortly before the outbreak of the Black Death in Europe in 1347 where the Pope ordered the destruction of black cats.
Oh, wow.
And there was one area in Poland that really is like, we like black cats. Poland was much less affected by the Black Death than other areas. And a lot of people think the virulence that the Black Death visited upon Europe in particular, as opposed to when the Black Death moved across the steppe in Asia, through China, through the Middle East, it wasn't quite as virulent, but it was really amped up in Europe. And a lot of people thought that maybe that had to do with the fact that there were no cats to kill the mice that were carrying the fleas that were infecting the people.
Makes sense.
I don't know to what extent that's true, but here's the bottom line. As we advance in society, as we advance technologically in terms of our understanding of science in the West, that's when you see the hangings, the executions, and the accusations of witchcraft. And I think it's funny, and I think it's important that you brought it up the way you did. It's when the Catholic Church is becoming less dominant that we see this push of heretic,
Witches.
yeah, independent thought, heresy, right? This
all
idea,
those terms.
exactly.
That concept
They
of
don't come from a place of theological or
right.
scientific ignorance.
It's not just about converting you
it's
anymore.
political weakness
It's political weakness.
that becomes sort of a motivating factor in identifying these people as different, as other, as scary.
Yeah. Well, to put a finer point, if I could, and
Please.
put a little more meat on the bones regarding the medieval period, right? I think about the Pope Innocent VIII, 1486, 1487. He was concerned about losing power, right? And
Sure.
he obviously wanted to make a statement. What he did was he hired a couple of charlatans, a couple of guys named Springer and Kramer, to write a book that would help people, priests, bishops, the power brokers in the Catholic Church better recognize who were in fact heretics. And this book that was written by these charlatans who were just
Are you
out to make a
talking
dollar
about the witches?
was called
Malleus Maleficarum.
Malleus Maleficarum.
Yeah,
I only
the-
know Malleus because that's Latin for hammer, and we have three little bones in our inner ear called the malleus, the anvil, and the stapes.
Yeah.
At any
a
rate,
witch's
our
hammer.
incus, malleus, incus, and stapes, which is the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. At any rate, yeah, hammer of witches. Interestingly enough, when you look at this book, you see that it's a how-to spot a witch guide. It's a witch pricking guide.
Yeah.
And it's unapologetically like anti-female. It's unapologetically anti-poor and anti anyone other than Catholic.
I think
and
that
so
was
some of the
society in
some
the
of the
1480s.
yeah, but some of the techniques that were employed when someone was looking for a witch, thanks to this how-to guide, they were, man, talk about macabre. This wasn't Halloween night. This was every day, right? This was, throw someone in the water. If they sink, weight them down first. Throw them in the water if you suspect a woman of witchcraft. Throw her in the water. Weight her down. If she sinks, she was a Catholic.
Yeah.
If she floats, she's a heretic, and burn her.
Yeah, they would.
Heads I win, tails you lose.
This is something that's called trial by ordeal. Okay, and this was a common medieval tool, especially in areas where there wasn't a robust system of justice.
Guilty
country
until proven
areas.
innocent.
But here's the thing: this is, I talked to some of my students about this. They would pull them out. I mean, it makes it more. They would actually pull them out, but they would still try them out. Another thing you would do in terms of, and the idea here is that divine.
But it was almost exclusively women who were accused.
Yes, at that time,
and
period,
it was disproportionately poor, maybe unmarried.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, they really referred to them as witches.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they would also do things like force them to grab a pebble. Out of a vat of oil, boiling oil. And the idea was you would bandage the witches or the accused's hands. And if they were innocent, the hand would be bandaged. 3 days, 5 days later, it would be unwrapped. And you would look, okay, well, what's going on? Is there an infection? How's this healing? And if it was healing well, you were innocent. If it was healing poorly, it was a sign that you were guilty. And it's funny because this is an age where this line of thinking is dying out. I mean, we're, you said the 1480, we're
on the cusp of the Enlightenment, right?
We're on the cusp of the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution of the 1600s, and we're still, sort of lost here.
Yeah, we're still in the dark ages. I mean, getting a little bit brighter, but still very much dark.
Still very married to these old, antiquated ideas of God's justice, of science.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if people could see my air quotes, but I hope they heard my air quotes.
For science.
Yeah, science.
Yeah.
That's how you air quote on the air.
Well, listen, we'll take a break and we'll move a little closer to what we consider modern day Halloween.
Modern day
when we come
Halloween,
back.
and let's talk about some of these costumes, what they mean.
For those who are just joining us, we're talking about the history and evolution of Halloween.
Boo.
For those that have been with us, we were talking on the other side about the early origins of Halloween, the superstitions, the fascination with the dead, maybe the nascent or beginnings of trick-or-treating with the souling, as it was referred. But when, Nelson, would you say that it became more of a formal thing, a thing in and of itself? When did Halloween become, well, for all intents and purposes, the Halloween that we know it today?
Fun.
Yeah. When did it become more fun?
Scary. It took some time. I mean,
in other words, when did it become less about like the dead and having to work for the dead, move people from purgatory on until the fun that is now?
I think it was, two things had to happen. Religion and society had to evolve, and economics had to evolve. And let me explain what I mean by that. In the 1600s and early colonial America, the 1700s, children were meant to be seen, not heard. They were little adults. They wore little suits. They were told that they were burdens. undutiful, ungrateful children were the children of Satan.
Mhm.
You know, this was
This is before Dr. Spock.
way before Spock. This was the messaging that they would receive, heavily disciplined. When we get into, let's say, America, right, in the 1840s and the 1850s, in particular the 60s and 70s, we have a growing middle class. We have an economy that's rapidly changing, a country that's industrializing. In 1870, you had 2/3 of Americans making their living through farming. By 1890, that's changed to 2/3 in factory payroll jobs. With all this money, with the way in which things are changing in the growing middle class, you can indulge your children
Yeah,
a
kids
little bit
can
more.
be a little more like kids.
Kids can be kids, right? They can have tricks. Did you ever eat tricks?
No,
You better not now. They're only for children.
but they had time to play tricks too.
They had time to play tricks, and
Or
they
just
were
play.
encouraged to do. Like families, like middle class families, like the Lincolns, are a really good example of this. They really indulged their children. Like their kids would drive a donkey through the White House. They'd play all these crazy games, and you know, if you extrapolate that out to society at large, this extra income, this. You know, like I think we were talking earlier, kids were field hands before this. They had to work, be an extra pair of hands. The family was the economic unit, and the kids were very much a part of it. In this period, they're not as much for as many.
So they got some idle time now.
They got some idle time, and idle time
Is
or
the
devil,
devil's
the
time.
devil's time, right? Idle hands are the devil's plaything. And so these kids would go and they'd do crazy kid stuff. And then, you know, for one night of the year, it sort of became formalized. Whereas once you might, you know, sing a song for a cookie or, you know, offer a Hail Mary for Aunt Mildred and get a treat. Now you can just sort of be a kid.
Yeah, so
and
the
sort of-
so the
sort of do
treats
the-
kind of turn to tricks.
The trick in and of itself kind of becomes the treat for
yeah.
the kid.
And the
for
kids get
family,
to
'cause
yeah,
you
the
have
kids
a chuckle, right?
Yeah, the
I
kids
mean, they would do things during this time period. They'd take gates off of fences and like put them in a tree. They would
Yeah.
lock people in their houses.
gate night.
And I think you'd be a little pissed.
You
But,
might.
But I mean,
Of course, that's still kind of good fun.
if you woke up in your house and you were locked in, I mean, wouldn't you have a bit of a chuckle? If nothing was stolen and nothing happened, you'd be pissed for like an hour. And then
Yeah,
you're
or if they
like,
had tied your door to, you know, the neighbor across the hall's door, and neither one of you could
that
get
is
out.
hysterical. That is so fun.
That's fine.
I would have done that as a kid. That would have been
probably
mine.
would've done that.
But that's sort of how it becomes fun.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get into the early 1900s, you're actually starting to see it formalized.
Mm-hmm. But then around 1920, it's become more sinister. It's become more delinquent, at least in America, right?
Yes. Well, in America,
What's going
and in
on
North
there?
America.
Why are the kids now? Well, I guess why are the kids now going out
again,
and
you have to put
engaging in
everything
vandalism and
you have to put everything in its context, right? We refer to the 1920s as the Roaring 20s, right? Americans were, you know, done with war. The election of Warren G. Harding represented what we called a return to normalcy, and Americans just wanted some gin, some jazz, and a good old fashioned good time. You know,
and kids are probably wanting the same
they're
thing,
wanting the same thing, and
but they can't get those
it,
things.
it was a time of fun and indulgence, and you know, it was like the 1990s without TV. And when I say TV, what do I mean? I mean great TV,
Yeah.
and great movies and great music. #90s. But the 1920s were a time with a lot of excess, you know, in the economy, and a lot of times that translates to, you know, and you can go back in Roman times and see sort of the same thing, where if there's a lot of available time and excess, people invest that in entertainments and enjoyments, and that's certainly true with children. You know, earlier civilizations, the focus was never on the children; it was on the ancestor, honoring the ancestor, honoring the elder, and that's true still in Western or Eastern civilizations today. By the time you get to the 1920s in the West, it's all focused on the kids.
Yeah.
And so when there's excess, the kids are going to take advantage. They're going to have a little fun. And so I think that excess made the formalization of a night where we could play games, dress up, be all of us. We could all be children. I think that made that process much more easier. And that's exactly what we see in Canada in the 1920s and 30s, the process of trick-or-treating, and it moves to the U.S. as a way of sort of controlling some of the broader mischief that we wanted to address.
Yeah, because prior to formalized trick-or-treating, I mean, these pranks, these juvenile sort of stunts, I don't want to say they turned into what we think of as the Purge. You remember that movie series?
I love The Purge.
Yeah, but at the same time, there were across America, particularly in urban settings, there were accounts of vandalism. There was accounts of theft. There were accounts of assault.
Yeah, it's it became cheeky fun.
Yeah, when people are being, pushed down or maimed, and I understand that at least two things happened. First, there were government officials who said, "Look, we gotta get a hold of this. I mean, we can't let kids just sort of run roughshod throughout the cities. We've got to figure something out." So they created these committees and they put these manuals out for people to host parties and to kind of take some of the delinquency out of the night. They thought, right? Communities could sort of get together and host parties, or maybe create these little, what we might think of today as haunted walks or haunted houses. Kids would be invited in the neighborhood to come over. The next house, maybe after they'd gone through a haunt in one house, they could go to another one and get maybe some treats, and then maybe go to another one and have some drinks and a bonfire. And then also we've got the Great Depression.
Right.
29, 30. Here it is in earnest. And now all of a sudden we got to really, really tighten up the belt, and we've got to really focus on the war effort. No candy.
In the late 30s.
We can't be, trading and buying and giving candy away for Halloween. We can't allow people to break shop owners' windows. We can't have all these pranks where people are going around at night knocking on doors and running away. Because, we've got to focus on this war effort.
Yeah, wars change so much outside of the political impact that they ultimately have. And just as another example, after World War II, we're really going to see a formalized Halloween process, formalized trick-or-treating process. Leading up to World War II, people never showered. I'm sorry, that's not true. They showered. They showered once every 3 days. It was thought unhealthy and unclean to shower every day. Soldiers that came back from World War I were, in the trenches, you were encouraged to clean daily, and that became habitual. And they would come back from World War I, and people.
But pretty superfluous if you're not in the trenches.
Yeah, when people would look at them like, "Is that
necessary?
Are you okay? Like, is that a problem?"
Yeah.
And then after World War II, it was the same thing. Soldiers would shower as often as possible to stay clean, and they brought that home with them. Yeah. And I think it was just, so many more service members and a closer time period. And after that, everybody started showering. Wars have these strange impacts that we don't really associate with the conflict itself, but are very much.
It can lead to really fast cultural changes, can it?
Yes,
in a way
we always focus on technology and politics, but the cultural changes are really big, and they're there.
Yeah,
and Halloween is kind of another one of those.
Well, it's gone through several iterations, but
it goes away before the war, and then
a lot of pent up demand, right? A lot of pent up demand for the candy and the pranks and the partying and the fun, and then of course the war is over. 1945, war's over, and people come home.
Yep,
and their parades. We can now start indulging a little bit more. Kids are invited now to wear different kinds of costumes for Halloween.
Yep.
They're encouraged to go out and trick or treat, take their pillowcase and their superhero costume out and trick or treat.
The costumes say a lot too about
society,
they do, don't they?
Well, it was Minnie Mouse and it was Zorro and a cowboy up until the 1940s or 50s. Then in the 1940s and 50s, the powers that be realized, wait a minute, we can commercialize this. We can monetize everything. We can make these little candies so that people don't have to spend time making soul cakes. We can create costumes so you don't have to make them yourself. And we can make every costume you can imagine. Kids can be a comic book character, a superhero, right? They can be anything they want.
I can't tell if that process ruins Halloween or creates it.
Well, it's like asking, did the paper plate and the paper cup and paper napkins ruin dinner time?
No, but they certainly ruined picnic time.
Allegedly, it saved women from having to spend so much time in the kitchen cleaning up.
So let's talk a little bit about some of these costumes since we're getting into the modern era of Halloween. What is your costume that what was your best costume ever? Do you remember what was it?
Well, I mean, as an adult, I've got several favorites.
Do you still dress up?
Oh yeah, I still make a big deal out of it. I live in a neighborhood, as you may or may not know, that does it up on Halloween. I don't want to put it out.
I'm watching.
I don't want to put it out for the public here, but we've got a pretty big Halloween celebration. Most of the houses in my neighborhood go all out. We have giant candy stations at the ends of cul-de-sacs. We order pizza. We have bonfires in the streets. Sometimes we have haunted houses and other kinds of things. Just hundreds, sometimes thousands of trick-or-treaters come through our neighborhood.
Thousands?
So, yes,
Wow.
thousands.
That's pretty good.
Back when I first moved here 8 years ago, one of the streets called Scare Street had like a Walking Dead theme. And they had trucks and old ambulances, fog machines, dozens of people dressed up as the Walking Dead. And every 20 or 30 minutes, you would hear the Thriller theme song. And about 15 to 20 people would come out of their houses crawling across the ground into this one guy's yard that was turned into a cemetery for the night. And they were doing choreographed Thriller dances.
Seems indulgent.
It was over the top. In fact, I'll tell you how over the top it was. When I asked the guy who coordinated all this, how much does this cost you, man? Why do you do this? And he said, listen, I didn't plan to do this. He said, but when my kids were small, I did a little something. And then the next year I had to better it because they expected more and they were getting older and I couldn't impress them unless I went bigger and bigger. When I first moved in, he was building these haunted houses out of pallets. He was a builder. He is a builder, by the way. He said he was spending $10,000 on just his yard.
Wow,
Now,
that's crazy.
the next year or two, they weren't going to do it. He said instead they were going to all meet at Disney, the whole street. He said it was cheaper to fly and spend a weekend at Disney.
It's probably a better use of money.
And it was sad. We went over to Scare Street a year or two after we moved here, and it was just completely pitch dark.
So what was your costume? What was your go-to costume?
Man, I was Donald Trump back in 2015.
Okay. Is that your go-to?
No.
You have a favorite costume?
I mean, that was a pretty good one, dude.
That was a good one.
I was
Did you do the
a
hair
Living
too?
Dead. Oh, yeah, I did all. I was a Living Dead.
A zombie?
Something like a zombie. More like the Day of the Dead character.
Okay.
A Living Dead. I was also a crash test dummy one year,
Oh, I
which
like
is pretty
that.
cool. I had
I
a
like
seatbelt that would blink around me and all
I
these
love
stickers.
that song. This Crash's Dummy song, you know?
Yeah, once.
You
It's
ever heard
actually
that song?
yeah, it's actually called
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Once there was
There's
this
a
girl who parents made her come right home from school. Well, when
That's a good one. I love that song.
as a kid, my favorites were my favorite characters at the time. Some Star Wars character, He-Man, G.I. Joe. And it was cool, like, because for $10 or $15, you could go to the store and get the little cheaply made costume complete with the little plastic mask that you stick over your face with the little rubber thing that would hold it on. And yeah, you could be anything you want. Of course, they didn't last
I
very
love
long.
that
They were
part of
cheaply
it, man.
made. Again, it was the paper plate version of a Halloween costume.
Yeah. As a kid, I was always.
But it was fast, man. It was fast. You could get anything you wanted pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It took a lot of the pain and effort out of Halloween. It made it just, again, continued with that idea of fun. And the
kid, I was
candies,
a,
man, I mean, the candy options, atomic fireballs, dude.
I hated those things.
God, I loved them, man.
Ugh, I don't
And
like
then,
hot.
of course, as I got older,
Well, you said we
and
did
moved
the
into
pain
a-
episode. You like the hot stuff.
yeah, but as I got older, moved into more affluent neighborhoods, had my own kids eventually, and moved into an even more affluent neighborhood, I realized that, man, despite the fact that Halloween should be a time of fun and carefreeness, it's a burden nowadays. You got to have the right candy. Kids want, at least in my neighborhood, they expect the full-size candy bar. They expect to be scared when they come into your yard. You can't just like come to the door in your regular clothes. You need to be dressed like a character. You know, occasionally put a cauldron out front. I've got a fog machine that smokes around the cauldron. I put gummy worms and other kinds of fishing lures like worms in the cauldron. I have beer and coolers for the parents. I go all out for Halloween.
Yeah.
And my neighborhood does the same thing. And we spend 3, 4, 5 hours partying in the street and walking around the neighborhood with our wagon and our beer. And yeah, the kids bring back a
I had a
serious amount of candy.
I always was we always did the pillowcase.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you're past 8, if you're walking around with anything under a pillowcase, then you got a problem. You always have to run. That's important. You know,
Got to run from house to house.
There was always a scheme. There was always a method that we kids employed in order to maximize.
Yeah, efficient, man. You got to be efficient.
There's a battle plan.
Don't run in straight lines. You gotta go diagonally.
Yeah, only a fool just goes without a plan.
Now, did you ever trade or sell any of the candy?
Oh, most assuredly.
Yeah,
So
some of the big winners on
vampire.
Halloween would take the excess candy to school and sell it.
I was a vampire because it was easy to maneuver in a vampire costume. Very little effort
That's a
there.
good point. Never thought
And
about
it's
that.
always scary, right? Now, as an adult, I've done
And you could always
things-
turn to the bat and fly from house to house.
There you go. So, as an adult, I've done things. I've been a person who's been run over by a car, which is fun. I'm a big Red Sox fan, so I was a giant red sock. I just went to Michael's and bought 2 giant pieces of cloth, cut it out.
Little lame.
It was a winner.
But I mean, I'll tell you what. Talk about being lazy and lame. There are at
Yeah,
least
some of the
two
costumes today are horrible, man.
other things you can do to be lazier and lamer.
Like-
One is when you engage in cultural appropriation or misappropriation, blackface.
That's not lazy or lame. That's just
It's
awful
lazy and lame and
disgusting.
awful. And then there's also the lazy lame of just, putting a pasty over your breast or putting a sock on your, walking around and, pretending to be a nudist or something like that. That's lazy and lame.
Yeah, but I think regardless of what costume you pick, I mean, it is weird that people can bring their own.
Well, put a little
races
effort into it,
put
right?
A little
put a little
into it.
effort.
That,
Again, like my
regardless of
friend,
what you pick.
and guest a few weeks ago said, the reason why some of these middle-aged white comics are being Me Too'd or being called out isn't because of woke culture. It's because they're lame and they don't put any effort and they haven't written a new joke in years and they think they can just continue recycling this racist garbage from the past. And likewise, we think we can just paint our face black or walk around with a guitar and a hat and pretend to be in a mariachi band. I mean, you can do that, but it's gross, lame, lazy. It's cheap.
Well, I don't like, and
and likewise,
for the
going
same reason.
completely nude or going semi-nude is pretty cheap and lame too. You can do it, but it's lame.
That's why I don't like the sexy costumes.
Yeah.
It's sexy kitty, sexy nurse, sexy turnip. Whatever. I don't like the sexy costumes.
But I get it. At the same time. Elvira is a great example of the sexy costume. Remember Elvira?
Yeah, but she wasn't a sexy costume. She was just.
Well, no, that was a character she created.
I know it was a character. But
Her
I'm
real name was
saying-
Cassandra, and she had been burned as a kid, and she had low self-esteem and didn't like the way she looked, and she sort of dolled herself out and put on this character to kind of take control of her sexuality. And, it got her some gigs. And in fact, when Coors Brewing Company came along and hired her to be their spokesperson, it changed everything for both Coors and for Elvira.
Yeah. Well,
Coors was jealous because other beer companies had the Super Bowl, and they were like, what holiday could we have? And they picked Halloween.
So do the psych thing then. Do the psych guy thing. Tell me what it is about the allure of dressing up, of being somebody that you're not. And I think, again, there's a connection. Forever, Halloween's been connected to the macabre, to the dark, to the sinister. But I don't really feel that that's as dominant as it was. Not nearly as dominant as it was. What is it about just dressing up and being
Well, man, I don't think
something or someone?
our fears are the same today as they were, right? In fact, I think our fears have become more adult-like versus childlike. Our fears have become more rooted in the here and now versus the afterlife. Well, prior to 1980, 1970, costumes were, again, witches, vampires, Frankenstein, cowboys, maybe some superheroes, right? Superheroes. Today, it seems that we dress up like political characters, and I think you want to talk about that a little bit, the political costumes and masks. But we dress up like political characters. We dress up like our Hollywood favorites.
Well, I can tell
there'll be a
you
lot
that
of Taylor Swifts out there this year, I bet you.
Donald Trump was your scariest
Yeah,
costume.
exactly. It's about, in my opinion, it's about taking control or finding some kind of sense of control for that which you don't control. And again, before the 1970s and 80s, we were obviously more concerned about death and the macabre and the unknown, and maybe it was war, maybe it was religion that was doing this. Then 1970s, 1980s, you've got counterculture. You've got women's right movement, second wave feminism. You've got anti-war. You've got sort of a
So you don't
a-
see
a-
the
a rebirth
sexy
of-
kitten, sexy nurse as like, you are you saying it's more empowering or
More
more like
empowering.
taking control of your
Yeah, more
sexuality rather
empowering.
than demeaning?
Yeah, absolutely right. It's the idea that I can be anything I want to be, at least for one night, and really nobody's going to judge me. But again, it gives me an opportunity to play, to role play. And who are we role playing now? We're role playing things that maybe we don't understand or that we can't be in our normal lives or that we're afraid of in our normal lives or that we can't. We're role playing some of these untouchables. Again, Taylor Swift.
Are you afraid of Taylor Swift?
No, but I'll never be as famous or as rich or as pretty as Taylor Swift. But for one night, I can do things maybe to make myself feel that way.
Sure.
I'll never be as
That's
powerful.
alluring.
I'll never be president. But for one night, I can be, I can put on a mask and be President Obama or Biden or whoever's the president at the time.
But there is still that creepy element, and what is the appeal there? Like I'm driving up and down your neighborhood,
The
and
macabre, the
you
occult.
know, I'm almost urinating in my front seat.
Oh,
I mean, it is freaky here.
I mean,
So,
the
like,
fascination,
what is-
fascination with the death doesn't die easy.
Yeah.
It's
You think that'll always be a part of Halloween? right?
probably we like being spooked, we like being startled again, but it's controlled, right? Like, some of the fun parts of Halloween, both as a kid and an adult, has and probably will for this always be the scary movies, Halloween, John Carpenter's
yeah.
Halloween, or certain music. Thriller comes to mind. Certain pieces of pop culture, like The Simpsons, doing their Halloween thing every year.
Treehouse of Horror. What are they on 47 now?
And again, I don't know if it's necessarily a reflection of our beliefs, thoughts, concerns, worries, so much as maybe we've been taken advantage of by media, taken advantage of by the system, right? Like, we may just be parroting back what we've been told or what we've been shown. We didn't treat Halloween this way 50 years ago. My grandpa never talked about Halloween the way I talk about it now. Now it's house parties, pizza, fires in the street.
But are we being manipulated, or is this just something we enjoy?
We do enjoy it, but it's a chicken or an egg. Am I enjoying it because I came up with it myself, or am I enjoying it because this is what's expected of me? I don't know. I can tell you one thing. It's not my intention to spend the money I spend every year on Halloween or Christmas either, for that matter. And it's interesting that, at least with respect to Christmas, it's been a thing in America so long that we really take it for granted. It's just a time where you're going to spend money. It's a time where you're going to, indulge. But Halloween hasn't always been like that. Not even in my lifetime. Certainly not in my grandpa's lifetime. I spend a ton of money on Halloween.
Yeah, it's definitely
And
changed
it's second
from
most.
when I was a kid.
It's definitely the second most commercial of all holidays in America. $3 billion, I believe, on candy alone. Another 3 or 4 billion on costumes. Don't even get me started on movies, television, and all the other stuff. I mean,
let's transition.
probably
then.
$10 billion a year spent on Halloween in
Let's talk
America.
about some of this candy. Let's talk about some of this. First of all, let's start with you.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Well, I can tell you one thing. It's not an apple. In fact, I used to get really upset
I had
when
a
my parents
dentist.
threatened to give me fruit for Halloween, or when they said they were going to give out fruit for Halloween. I didn't want to
Oh
be
my
the butt of
God,
my
no.
friends' jokes. I'm
Dude,
like, no,
I
I
had a
got friends coming
dentist.
over. You got to have the candy.
We had a dentist in our neighborhood who gave out floss and toothpaste
Oh, my
and
gosh.
toothbrushes. I'm like, dude, no.
Well, I mean, it worked a couple of years there, particularly in the 80s, when there was this fear over kids
Well, that's what I wanna
allegedly
talk
being
about,
like
yeah.
poisoned by certain candy
Or
or
razor
blades
blades.
put
That's
into the
not a
apples.
thing.
Well,
It's
of
not
course
a
it's not a
thing.
thing. And honestly, I thought that was lame anyway. I remember being an 80s kid. I was 7, 8, 9 years old in 1980. And my trick-or-treating was in the 80s. That was at the same time as Ronald Reagan. That was at the same time as the evil empire of the Soviet Union. That was at the same time that every day or two I had to do a nuclear drill at school, put my head underneath my desk. I mean, we were really afraid of nuclear fallout.
And Snickers.
Oh, my gosh.
And Snickers
And
with
yet-
razor blades.
I was told you need to beware of those apples with the razor blades. And I'm thinking, I hate apples. You don't ever have to worry about me biting into an apple with a razor blade because I'm not going to bite into an apple. And candies? What kind of candy are you people giving out that you can poison? I'm getting the candy bars. I want the candy bars that you can't unwrap and wrap back.
That's what people were afraid of, man.
They were afraid of it. Man, I know.
People were afraid of
My
everything.
I want to say the hospital, I am almost certain that the hospital in my hometown in the 80s would open up the door to the public and they could bring their candy in that their kids had picked up and they would x-ray their candy for them. How about that?
So lame.
How lame.
What a waste of
You know,
time.
there's a guy from, I don't know, University of Delaware or something like that, Joel Best. Joel, I don't know. He's a sociologist. I apologize, Joel, if I'm getting your name wrong and or your school, your affiliation, but he has done probably the most robust investigation across America looking for any evidence of a stranger purposely killing another stranger's kid with Halloween candy. And he's found nothing.
I hate
He
to
has
laugh,
found,
but
however,
it is so
he
lame.
did
It's
find,
such a
however,
stupid idea.
that Ann Landers,
Yeah.
Dear Abby, and her
Yeah,
sister,
yeah.
the one that started the column, really wrote about this in the 1980s. Starting in the 80s, was writing about how, oh, tonight, it's going to be one of the nights people lose their kids. Some kid's going to be killed by Halloween candy. But when he went and looked at some of these alleged reports or cases of it, he found things like, yeah, this guy poisoned his own kid for an insurance policy, or this person accidentally was poisoned, or it turns out this person didn't actually get poisoned by the candy. They got poisoned by something else, or, you know, it was, we were fascinated by, and we fell for this conspiracy theory or this urban legend.
I mean, this is not the Halloween you have to watch.
No.
All right. Ever since 1960,
Okay.
the presidential candidate in an election year who has sold the most Halloween masks. So in 1960, the candidates.
Well, the
John
candidates don't
Kennedy-
actually sell them, but
No, but
some company makes them in their image,
The
their
likeness
likeness. Okay.
of that candidate. The candidate that sells the most
Mm.
has won the presidency every single year, except for 2020.
When Hillary won.
No, Hillary
sorry.
lost.
Hillary
When
lost, but
President Biden
there were
won.
more Hillary masks sold.
There were more. 2016, there were still more Trump masks.
Okay. And then
In
2020.
there were more Trump masks sold, and President Biden won.
And President Biden won, yeah.
So,
Well, honestly, it's because
if-
they probably were wearing the mask that's the scariest.
I mean, there's some really good, scary mask contenders. I mean, I know DeSantis' campaign is going down the toilet, but that would be a scary mask.
That would be a scary mask.
Who else? Who would you wear? What presidential, in your lifetime, what president?
Well,
or
I've only ever
presidential
worn
candidate-
one, and
You
it
wore
was
the
Donald
Trump
Trump.
one.
Mhm.
Okay. Would you wear, what winner would you wear? Well, I guess Trump won.
Trump
So,
won. And honestly, man, it would be kind of creepy,
The
right?
Clinton mask was a big seller, right?
Yeah.
But
Clinton.
that's like the equivalent of sexy nerds.
American presidents, a scary mask. Probably Abraham Lincoln would be a scary one, particularly with someone like me, tall and lanky like me.
He's pretty ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, he said he was ugly. I'm not just saying that about him. He's saying that about himself.
No, he was ugly.
But
I think he was objectively
but
ugly.
it's going to be interesting, right, to see what happens in this election. Maybe we will be sitting here a year from now doing our second Halloween episode.
Talking about
and
the
we'll be
Dean
talking
Phillips
about
mask.
The Dean Phillips effect.
I don't know. I doubt Dean Phillips is going to sell that many masks this Halloween or any other.
Hey, here's a scary idea for an
Mhm.
episode. Let's put Democrats and Republicans on the couch.
Yeah, we should.
You know,
We should.
but
Well, listen, how do we sum this up today?
well, you know how we're going to sum it up. We're going to sum it up how we always sum
With
it
a
up, my friend.
diagnosis?
We're going to diagnose
Uh-huh.
Halloween. And, you know, I mean, there's so many opportunities here. You could definitely do, you know, schizophrenia, right? Hearing voice. You could do some. I mean, there's so many different ways you could go.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about
Yeah,
the psych
I
guy's
got it.
perspective because we've put it on the couch. You are diagnosing it.
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, sir. Go.
Well, before I give you my clinical diagnosis, I want to give you my economic, political, sort of cultural diagnosis.
Give me that first.
Halloween represents one of the most successful examples of American consumerism that there is.
True.
I mean, Christmas notwithstanding,
True. 100%
and
true.
maybe
Can't-
even and maybe Valentine's Day notwithstanding.
Ugh.
Successful, man, very successful.
I would say more than Christmas, to be honest with you. Absolutely.
Now, in terms of diagnosis, I know that Halloween is about a lot of things, but what it's about more than anything, in my opinion, is about indulgence.
Okay.
And something that represents indulgence, I think of like an eating disorder, binging and purging.
Binging.
Binge eating disorder. That's the way
Binging.
I think about Halloween.
I like it.
Binging. We
I
binge
like
on.
it.
We binge on candy. We binge on costumes and parties and movies.
It is a day of excess.
It's a day of excess.
I
It's
like it.
binging.
I
Now,
like
again, I am no clinical psychologist. This is just for fun and whimsy. I do not mean to demean or to lessen or cheapen what is a very serious diagnosis in binge eating disorder. This is all in good form, fun, even if it's not in good form. I'm being metaphorical. I'm being flippant. I'm being silly. Admittedly, I'm not acting as a professional,
But you are acting as a person.
but
who
I am
loves
acting.
Halloween.
I am.
I like it. I like it.
Well, Nelson, it's been a pleasure.
Look for that one. Look for us next week and the week after.
And yeah, give us a like, give us a listen, share.
And if it's your thing, please say a prayer for a friend Bob. But
Yeah,
if
please
it's not
do.
your thing, then please pass the good thought along for him. All right.
Absolutely. Hey, we really appreciate your time and your attention.
Trick or treat, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.